Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Ray Tampa podcast. Our podcast offers bold commentary about various subject matters with a laser-like focus on the truth. My name is Ray Tampa, and I'm the host of the Ray Tampa podcast. We have in our studio today two talented and intelligent gentlemen, Mr. Russell Cato and Mr. Jamie Wilson III, my co-host. Also, we have as our guests two standout members of our community, Dr. Bishop MANUEL SYKES, Bethel Community Baptist Church, and Reverend Kenny IRBY, Historic Bethel AME Church. Our guests are going to share some very personal information that is of vital importance to residents of our community and beyond. Bishop Sykes and Reverend IRBY, welcome to the Ray Tampa podcast.
Good to be here.
Outstanding. Glad to be here.
Certainly, we appreciate having you here. Mm-hmm. Current statistics suggest that Black men are 50% more likely to develop prostate cancer in our lifetime. 2, we're twice as likely to die than members of the Caucasian race. There are many other damning statistics concerning this dreadful disease, but our podcast is only 30 minutes, and our focus will be on the lived experiences of our guests. Our guests will share some information that is geared toward one goal, and one goal only: saving lives.
Amen. Amen.
Amen. To begin, I ask that our guests share with us where you were born and educated, beginning with you, Dr. Sykes.
I was born in Jacksonville, Florida, and lifelong student. I have a couple of masters and a couple of doctorates.
Nice. Awesome. And where did you get your education?
Well, I went to Luther Rice Seminary for my bachelor's, and then I went to Drew University for a Master of Divinity and a PhD, and Argosy University for a education doctorate in counseling and psychology.
Awesome. Thanks for that information. Reverend IRBY, what about you?
So I'm the Yankee in the group.
The Yankee.
I'm from born and raised in Washington, D.C. In my former career as a photojournalist, I traveled wide and large internationally, but moved here from 28 years ago from New York. And in terms of academic studies, public school system in Washington, D.C., I went to Boston University for undergraduate, University of Missouri for graduate studies, and some seminary study at Dallas Theological Seminary.
Okay, great, excellent. Reverend IRBY, how long have you served in the ministry?
So this is my, I just got my 10th appointment to Historic Bethel. This is my 20th year pastoring. I've been an itinerant elder for 25 years.
Excellent, excellent. Dr. Sykes, how long have you served in the ministry?
Well, I was licensed in 1990. Jesus, it's been so long ago. Let me just say this. I've been pastoring for 36 years, 5 years in Newark, New Jersey, and 30 here in St. Petersburg.
What was that number again?
36 years
36
total.
years. Mm-hmm. Well, I tell you what, your 20 years, your 36 years have been a blessing to us in this community. Thanks for what you do. Pastor Sykes, when were you first diagnosed with prostate cancer?
I was diagnosed in 2007. I had a very good doctor, Kenneth, and he was very, very astute in terms of prostate cancer. He was a survivor himself. And because he was my doctor at the time, every time I would go to him, it was his policy to do a digital exam. And so, you know, it's unpleasant, but, you know, it's just part of the protocol. Well, I didn't know honestly that I had an enlarged prostate. That never really registered with me. But then I had a frequent urination problem, all going to the bathroom at night. And so I asked what could I do to 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 deal with that. And he prescribed some medicine. And then I realized my body developed a dependency on the medicine. So if I went without taking the medicine, I couldn't go at all. So I went from bad to worse. And so we discussed um, a surgical option, to remove what probably was scar tissue. And he would always do our PSA. And so on the visit, when I came to discuss with him the surgical procedure, he asked me to go to the desk and get it scheduled. And by the time I got to the desk, he was tapping me on the back and said, "I need to talk to you." And something inside told me this was not good news. And so that's when in January 11th, 2007 was when I got those words.
How old were you at that time?
I was 49.
49?
Hmm.
And was your diagnosis restricted to your prostate?
Well, initially, that was what we were told. Of course, we did the digital, not the digital exam. We did the biopsies, and it seemed to be localized into one area of one side of the prostate. It was only after I had surgery, and surgery was my choice. I'm one of those persons where Jesus said, if your right eye offends you, pluck it out. So my thinking was, rather than deal with it over a long period of time, I just rather get it done. So fortunately, my brother was a doctor, and he was able to connect me with Henry Ford Hospital up in Detroit, one of my favorite cities. And I had the robotic surgery there by Dr. Menon, and he had a lot of experience in the robotic surgery. But it was after the surgery where they told me it had spread to my bladder, and that they had to do a resection. They had to cut it out and reattach my urethra. So, that way, that urgency that I would experience when I had to go to the bathroom was a result of that. But fortunately, by that procedure, they were able to find and to deal with that.
Very good.
Excellent, excellent.
Mhm.
Now, what stage was your cancer at the point of discovery? What stage of your cancer was there?
Well, I believe it was around stage 2. But I cannot say for certain because the bladder cancer hadn't been discovered or looked at. I still remember a Gleason score of 6, and that's kind of like the relative speed at which it's operating. But honestly, they never really delved into, okay, you're stage 2 or stage 3. I just know that, by experience, that if it has spread somewhat, it's farther than stage 1.
We're going to come back to the Gleason score. We're going to have a little more discussion about that, the Gleason score. But I want to throw these questions or share these questions with you, Reverend IRBY, such as, when were you first diagnosed?
So I was diagnosed a year ago, a little over a year ago, actually, in July of 2022. And similarly, I didn't have any real physical examples. It was really through the questionnaire. When my urologist asked me, well, actually, my primary care physician, Dr. Kevin Witt, he asked me, he said, "Well, are you having any issues?" And I said, "No, not really." Other than, and I said it very flippantly and casually. I said, I didn't have to go to the bathroom as many times, but we didn't wake up as many times and want to sleep. And he said, "Oh, all right. Well, let's just, let's do another PSA test the prostate antigen specific antigen test." And I did. And he came back, and I had been taking for 9 years, very proactive awareness around my PSA. And he said, "Oh, it's up a little bit." It was a 3. And he said, "So let's just test," because it had regularly been 1.5, no higher than 2. And so that 3 was an indicator that we needed to pursue further testing.
Mm-hmm. And I want to chime in on that particular point, because even though 3 is in the normal range, 3 is in the normal range, but what they look at is the trend.
Right.
You could have been a 1, you could have been a 1.5, a 2, and then that 3 caused the concern because the trajectory was upward.
It's upward.
And right. It was a relatively fast trajectory.
Correct.
They call that the PSA velocity, how fast it's moving. But I wanted to point out 3 is still in the normal range, but the concern is how fast is it moving from the low point, right, or the lowest point.
And I'll mention that over the period of me getting the issue of frequent urination and so forth, it was over about a year time. But with every 6 months, my prostate number had gone up. The PSA had gone up. So about every 6 months, it was like 1.5 points going up. And that's another, I should say, indicator combined with the enlarged prostate, yes, which, you know, I really didn't pay a lot of attention to.
Okay. Reverend IRBY.
Yes, sir.
How old were you when you were first diagnosed?
61.
61. And do you remember what your Gleason score was?
It's a 7, 3 plus 4.
Okay. What we want to do is educate our listeners on that Gleason score. As Pastor Sykes mentioned, his Gleason score was a 6. Yours was 7. My Gleason score was a 9. Now, his 6 meant that his cancer was low grade. Low grade. That's what a 6 is. A 7 mentions that, or means that his cancer was mild. He had a mild grade cancer. My 9 suggested that I had a very high grade cancer. What does high grade means? It means that my cancer is more likely to spread and to spread fast. I had a very dangerous cancer. So in my mindset, when the doctor told me that I had cancer, even before we got to the Gleason score and all that other stuff, just saying, Ray, you have cancer, it just blurted out of my mouth. Cut it out. That's all I said. Cut it out. And the reason I said that is because I just witnessed my brother pass away from prostate cancer. And I was sitting next to his bed at hospice, Bayfront Hospital. It was very sad because my brother was 6'4", 245, 250 pounds, big muscular guy. But at the point I'm sitting next to his bed, he was skin and bones. Skin and bones. It was horrible. So naturally, having witnessed that, I said, no, cut it out. I didn't want it in my body not one day longer than it had to be there. But again, I'm hopeful that our audience will take note of what I said about the Gleason scores. That's a part of the diagnostic process. Okay, now let's go to this question. Once you got your diagnosis, once you got your Gleason scores and everything else the doctors were telling you, the next step is the treatment options that you were given. The treatment options. I want to ask you first, Dr. Sykes, which option? No, let's talk about the options that you were given.
Well, the options that I were given was certainly radioactive seeds being implanted in the prostate, as well as radiation. Not a lot was said about chemotherapy, but radiation, and then, of course, prostatectomy. So my thinking was, well, if I have the the radiated seeds planted and it goes away, the prostate will still be there. And likewise, if I have radiation, it could come back again. So my belief was, if it's bad, just get rid of it and remove any vestige of any cells that might linger in that area. So that was my choosing, and it didn't really take a lot of flipping the coin to do it. I'm just that kind of person. Let's get it done.
And and I'm going to share my thought processes later on, but Reverend IRBY.
My process was a little bit different. I began with prayer. Upon the diagnosis, I was with a urologist, my wife and I, like Pastor Sykes, I had gone through all the testing. I did the MRI, I did the liquid biopsy, then what they call the invasive biopsy, where the tissue testing was actually done. And so after prayer, we began to think about these options as the urologist presented them. And the by this time, again, we're talking a year ago, the radioactive seeds are not strongly advocated. The prostatectomy was advised, and then radiation options, and the new ultrasound, high wave ultrasound, which insurance usually doesn't cover. There's been the most promising results with that. And it was suggested that I could watch and wait if I felt comfortable with that. And similarly to Bishop, I was like, no, we're going to do something now. We're going to be led by the Spirit. And I proceeded with conversation. He was one of the first people that I reached out to, and he gave me his insights. Unfortunately, I have a very good friend who's a doctor and pharmacist who suggested that I consider Moffitt because in this region they have excellent results, and I went for a second consultation at Moffitt, and ultimately went with the hormone treatment and radiation.
Okay, so we've heard two different treatment options selected. Two different treatment options selected. Personally, I followed the path that Dr. Sykes took. Cut it out. Cut it out. So I had the surgery. And because I caught it early, and this is the key to us surviving, catching it early. Because I caught it early and it was restricted to my prostate, even though I had a very aggressive form of cancer, I got it cut out on May 2nd, 2022, May 2nd. 1 week after that, I went back to the doctor because she had the biopsy report. And she said, Ray, you're cancer-free. Cancer-free. Then I went back a month later for another check. She said, you're still cancer-free and you don't need to do anything.
Amen.
I'm talking nothing. She said, you're good to go. No radiation, no chemo, no anything. You're good to go. Is that not a blessing?
Yeah.
That's really a blessing.
Is that not a blessing?
Especially with the high number you had.
Yeah.
Very high number.
And you know, one of the things that you mentioned with your brother, both of my brothers now have had prostate cancer. Before us, the only person we knew was my grandfather, who lived to be 99. So, you know, for me, I was in my 40s. My brothers were in their 60s because they had theirs in the last 2 years. So it's very important that we are tested when you know something is in your medical history. And then the other thing, and I don't want to take a lot of time, is this: we have to advocate for our health.
Yes, yes.
When Obama passed Obamacare, there were 13 protocols that they had to follow that was not normally followed in order for these companies to receive those funding. That means that the doctors couldn't overlook things on us that they used to overlook. They couldn't give us an aspirin and say, call me in the morning and charge for a full physical. And so what's happening now in our community, of course, is a healthcare crisis. And many of our men, and this is before you get to the psychological issue, many of our men just don't have access. And then, you know, so when you don't have access, a lot of times, and this is with everything concerning us, by the time its symptoms begin to show, it's too late.
Yeah. And I think it's also the thing we also have to take under consideration is the advancements in the science.
Yes.
You know, I was very particular about during my investigation. I knew a lot because, as I shared earlier in our pre-interview, I had been a prostate cancer advocate, right, through men's ministry in the church, and was making sure that in all of our regular meetings and activities, PSA testing was being done, helping destigmatize a lot of the kinds of thoughts that I found other brothers had about the testing. They didn't even know that it was a blood test that could be very instrumental in diagnosis. So I had been following those things, and I knew that there was an African-American brother, an African brother, Dr. Kazja Yamawa at Moffitt, who was the world-renowned expert in the radiation treatments. And so I sought an audience with him, as well as Dr. Pyle Singh, who are right here in the Bay Area at Moffitt in Tampa. And they shared with me at my age and the cancer that I had, that the radiation was a very instrumental alternative to consider. So,
well, I'll tell you, I was referred to a radiation oncologist, doctor. Well, I don't need to name him. And as I consulted with him, we had a very lengthy discussion. And it got to the point where I asked him this single question. Doctor, if you were in my position, which treatment would you choose? Now, he's specializing in radiation. That's where he makes his money. But he didn't offer that to me. He said, if I were in your shoes, I would go with the surgery. And there are a number of reasons for him to go with that statement, because if I took radiation, you know, you have to prepare for that radiation treatment.
Don't tell me about it. I've been there.
I know you know. I know you know. And the preparation part would have affected my kidneys. And I don't want anything messing with my kidneys. So radiation was out for that reason. Russ, if you don't mind, and from our audience to understand, sitting at this table, there are 4 prostate cancer survivors. 4.
Sure.
And the 5th person at this table, he treats a lot of prostate cancer patients. His wife is a physician assistant. His son is a physician assistant. He knows a lot about the subject matter. So here we are opening up to our audience, sharing information that has one goal and one goal only, and that is to save lives. To save lives. Russ, how old were you when you were first diagnosed?
I think I was in my 50s when I was diagnosed as.
In your 50s?
In my 50s. But you know what? The greatest thing that happened to me was Dr. Kenneth Bryant. That was the greatest thing happened to me. A well-educated man. When I went to Dr. Bryant.
Black man.
A well-educated black man. He was just everything to me. Because what he taught me was, first, he said this to me. This is not a death sentence. I remember him telling me this. He said, but you got to be educated with it. He educated me on prostate cancer. I'm talking about weeks and weeks that I went to his office and we sat and we talked. And there was some time I got scared because I know I was taking other patients' time up. You know, but Bryant, he was there for me every which of the way. And my thing is with God now, you know, let me leave him out. But Dr. Bryant, that was a man.
Russ, I appreciate you saying that, and I appreciate you saying that you were in your 50s. Russ is older than all of us, and that's a blessing. I say that with all endearment. Russ is 6?
85.
85. I'll take that 1 year back. 85 years old. He was diagnosed in his 50s. So you can see the longevity of him catching his issue so long ago.
And my operation came in the 90s, 93.
Well, thanks for sharing that. And what Dr. Bryant said to you is what we're trying to say to our public. It is not a death sentence.
That's absolutely correct.
It's not a death sentence. If it was a death sentence, we wouldn't be so happily sharing this information.
You know, and there's not a death of the ego either. You see, I mean, the truth is, many men are afraid of hearing that because there's this association in their mind that if I have prostate cancer and I have it treated, then I'm going to be impotent. And, you know, that is not hardly the issue as it once was when they did the radical surgeries. You know, the robotic surgeries and the other treatments do not leave men impotent. Now, there are medicines and other kinds of therapies that helps a man to regain his ability to have an erection and to be sexual. But this whole idea of one equals the other is not a true statement. And so my thing is that along with the fear factor is the emotional factor. We have to realize that as a culture and as a people, most of our men were looked at as breeders. Could we breed? And you know, and so we took on that, and then we owned that whole mystique of the black man's and the black woman's sexuality. And so what happens is that when we have that in our mind and we wear that like a badge, then when that kind of news comes, or even the fear of it, we run the other way. And many men I know men who have died. They simply didn't want to have it. I've known of men whose wives say, hey, I can't deal with it. I got to have mine. But it was all premature. And I want to say that, you know, a man has to be more than the sum total of his genitals or ability to produce seed. And once we get there, and there are a lot of good women out there who are supportive, who's not measuring us from the bottom up, you know, and there is life, there is sex after prostate cancer. So that needs to be put out there for old men and young men.
Glad you're saying it.
And that is a part of identity. You know, the identity is not only in your sexual proudness, right? And as Bishop alludes to, again, the science, the medical advancements have provided other alternatives, you know, along the way. And it is equally important for us to understand that the baseline for educating ourselves about the fact that we are what we eat, and how important diet and regular checkups are in this process here. And so in terms of education, if just us having this conversation and demystifying it, right, is a great advancement, then each one of us can reach one other. And we think about the influence of the potential that as we begin to expand our sphere of influence, the men in our families, in our congregations, in our social circles, we are able to have this kind of honest dialogue. It's really important.
Well, I can't. Jay, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. First thing I want to say is, my son and my wife, they're nurse practitioners, licensed nurse practitioners. Secondly, because I had to correct that, I get killed. And
set the record.
What were you? What, as far as the doctor, as far as the foods you eat, you know, post dealing with this prostate cancer, what did they say stay away from? Were you restricted or anything?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, diets, fatty foods, and sugar, you know, processed foods. You know, I like to refer to the fact that you got to stay from the two white elements, salt and sugar. They're black man killers, and they both feed they feed the cancer cancer thrives on those elements.
I like the way he put it. Stay away from these two white elements
And soy, and
because
soy
they're
products.
black men killers. Oh, wow. They're black men
I
killers.
do know where
Okay.
we gotta go.
Well, at this point, I want to say the testimony of these brave, unselfish gentlemen have done us great service here, great service. But the key, no matter what, is early detection, early screenings.
Mhm.
Yes.
Early detection, early screenings. Black men, we plead for you to get to your doctor as soon as possible to start getting tested or screened for prostate cancer.
Mhm.
The time of discovery can dictate what options are available to you.
Exactly.
With that being said, I want to say to the guests, thanks a lot. We really appreciate your presence here.
Definitely.
To my co-host, as always, thanks for all you do for the Ray Tampa podcast and offering your pointed questions. And to our listening audience, thanks for tuning in to the Ray Tampa podcast on 99.1 FM The Bird. And we ask that you do so each and every Tuesday evening, 5:30 p.m. Also, go to YouTube, type in the Ray Tampa podcast, and you can see them all. Sponsorships are welcome. Good evening.
Mhm.